The air hung thick with rain and cigarette smoke outside the dingy jazz bar. The year was 1997, a time when the internet was still a novelty, and cell phones were bricks owned by Wall Street hotshots. I was drowning my sorrows in a glass of cheap whiskey, the saxophone's mournful notes mirroring the ache in my chest. It was a night like any other, or so I thought. Then I saw her. She was leaning against the bar, a vision in a scarlet dress that clung to her curves like a second skin. Her eyes, the color of melted chocolate, met mine across the room, and a jolt of electricity shot through me. She had an air of mystery, a quiet intensity that drew me in like a moth to a flame. We talked. Or rather, I stammered like a schoolboy while she listened with a knowing smile playing on her lips. Her name was Serafina, a name that rolled off my tongue like a prayer. She spoke little about herself, deflecting my questions with a laugh or a suggestive glance. But her eyes, those bottomless pools of darkness, held a story waiting to be told. As the night wore on, fueled by alcohol and an attraction I couldn't ignore, I found myself walking her back to her apartment. It was nestled in a quiet, almost desolate part of town, the building itself a testament to neglect and decay. But none of that mattered. All I could focus on was Serafina, her intoxicating perfume, and the way her hand felt in mine, small and delicate yet surprisingly strong. Her apartment was dimly lit, filled with the scent of sandalwood and something else I couldn't quite place. The walls were bare except for a single, unsettling painting, a macabre depiction of a woman, her body contorted in agony, a crimson stain blooming on her chest. It should have scared me, sent me running for the door. But I was already too far gone, ensnared by Serafina's web of allure and mystery. Our kisses started as tentative explorations, quickly escalating into a desperate, hungry dance. She tasted of cinnamon and sin, and I lost myself in the sensations, my blood singing with a cocktail of desire and apprehension. Then I saw them. Scars. Thin, silvery lines crisscrossing her back, some old, some so fresh they were still pink and angry. They stood out in stark contrast to her smooth, porcelain skin. A cold dread seeped into my intoxicated haze. "What are these?" I asked, my voice hoarse, tracing the outline of a particularly long scar that snaked down her ribcage. She didn't flinch, didn't shy away from my touch. Instead, she leaned into it, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Her eyes, when they met mine, gleamed with an unsettling excitement. "Marks of experience," she whispered, her voice a husky murmur against my ear. Before I could probe further, she pulled me down onto the plush carpet, her lips claiming mine with renewed urgency. For a while, I let myself get lost in the heat of the moment, pushing the image of the scars, the painting, the strange perfume to the back of my mind. But the questions lingered, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. Later, as she lay beside me, her breathing deep and even, I couldn't shake off the disquiet. I rose from the bed and walked toward a bookshelf, my fingers trailing over the spines of the books. Most were about anatomy, human physiology, the intricacies of the nervous system. And then I saw it, a book on ancient torture techniques, its cover depicting a collection of wicked-looking instruments. My stomach lurched. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. Turning back, my gaze fell upon a small, ornate chest tucked beneath the table. Curiosity, that age-old enemy, got the better of me. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a collection of sharp objects that made my blood run cold. Scalpels, needles, a wickedly curved blade that glinted menacingly in the dim light. Suddenly, Serafina was behind me, her arms snaking around my waist. "Beautiful, aren't they?" she murmured, her breath warm on my neck. I spun around, the box clattering to the floor, its contents spilling out like a macabre secret. "What is this, Serafina?" My voice trembled, a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. "Don't you see?" Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. "Pain is the ultimate high. It strips you bare, exposes the raw nerve of your being. And to control it, to inflict it, to savor it, that's true power." Her words washed over me, each syllable a hammer blow to my sanity. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew, the one I shared a drink and a laugh with. This was something else, something dark and dangerous. What followed was a blur of blood, ecstasy, and fear. I was both participant and victim, caught in a whirlwind of sensation I couldn't comprehend. The line between pleasure and pain blurred, my senses overloaded, my mind teetering on the precipice of madness. The sun, when it finally rose, sliced through the heavy curtains, a harsh counterpoint to the night's darkness. I lay there, bruised and battered, my body a canvas of her desires, my mind a wasteland of confusion and shame. Serafina was gone. I never saw her again. The memory of that night haunts me still, a shadow lurking in the recesses of my mind. It was a brutal awakening, a reminder that the world is far stranger, and far more terrifying, than we often care to believe. I carry the scars, both physical and emotional, as a constant reminder of that night. A reminder of the seductive nature of darkness, the intoxicating allure of the forbidden. Most of all, a reminder of the thin veil that separates passion from madness, pleasure from pain, and the human heart from the abyss. I was drawn to him. Not by his looks, though he was undeniably handsome in a brooding, intense way. No, it was his art that captivated me. His paintings were dark, haunting things, filled with twisted imagery, unsettling colors, and an undercurrent of raw, unbridled emotion that resonated deep within my soul. They whispered of a tortured soul, of a mind that saw the world in shades of gray and black, and somehow, I felt an inexplicable pull towards that darkness. He was known as the Raven, a moniker that perfectly captured the essence of his art. His work was rarely displayed in galleries, instead circulating in the underground art scene, whispered about in hushed tones in smoky backrooms and hidden studios. I stumbled upon his work by chance, a flyer tucked under the door of a local coffee shop. The image on it was simple: a solitary crow perched on a crumbling tombstone, its eyes glinting with an unsettling intelligence. It stayed with me, a persistent echo in my mind, drawing me closer to the artist who had created it. I tracked him down via a website, a single page with a stark black background and a single, pulsing red button labeled Contact. I sent a message, a simple request to view his work, and waited, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The reply came within hours, a curt message with the address of his studio and a time for me to arrive. No latecomers, it ended ominously. The studio was tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, a dilapidated warehouse with peeling paint and rusted metal gates. The air hung heavy with the smell of solvents and old paint, a faint metallic tang that made my stomach churn. Inside, the space was even more unsettling. Walls were plastered with canvases, each one a chilling tableau of death and decay, twisted figures, and macabre landscapes. In the center, a single light bulb cast a harsh, yellow glow, illuminating a canvas depicting a woman with a vacant stare and crimson stains dripping from her eyes. It was a masterpiece, a chilling testament to the artist's talent, but it also sent shivers down my spine. He was standing in the shadows, draped in a long, black coat that swallowed him whole. His face was pale, framed by a mop of dark, unruly hair, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds, holding a depth that both fascinated and terrified me. He introduced himself simply as Raven, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that sent a thrill through me. "I've seen your work," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It's captivating." He smiled, a slow, unnerving smile that stretched his lips wide, revealing teeth that were unnaturally white and sharp. "Captivating, is it? I'm glad. I strive for that." We spent the next few hours in the studio, him talking about his art, his inspirations, and the twisted beauty he saw in the world. He spoke of the decay and the darkness, of the human condition, of the fleeting nature of life and the inevitable dance with death. I listened, mesmerized by his words, by his passion, by the way his eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire. He was a complex man, a contradiction of light and shadow, and I found myself drawn to him even further. The darkness of his art, the morbid themes, the unsettling imagery, it was all strangely alluring. It was as if his art held a mirror to the darker recesses of my own soul, revealing truths I never knew existed. As the night wore on, the studio fell quiet, the air thick with a palpable tension. We were standing close, our bodies almost touching, and I felt a strange pull towards him, an irresistible force drawing me closer. I was aware of his gaze on me, hot and possessive, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was falling for him. He leaned in, his breath warm on my cheek, a scent of leather and something else, something dark and earthy, filling my senses. "You're different," he whispered, his voice a husky rasp. "You see something in my work that others don't." I could only nod, my throat constricted with a mixture of fear and desire. He took my hand, his touch surprisingly gentle, and led me to a small table in the corner. It was covered with a crimson cloth, and on it lay a single, gleaming blade. It was beautiful, a work of art in itself, the handle intricately carved, the blade polished to a mirror shine. It looked more like a ceremonial dagger than a weapon, yet it sent a jolt of fear through my body. "This is my muse," he said, his voice low and seductive. "My inspiration. It is what gives my art its edge, its power." He gently picked up the blade, running his thumb along its smooth surface. His eyes held mine, and I saw a glint of something dangerous flickering in their depths. "You, my dear," he whispered, his breath hot on my neck. "You are my ultimate muse. You are the missing piece, the key to unlocking the true potential of my art." He was looking at me with a hunger that sent a shiver down my spine, a hunger that was both terrifying and intoxicating. I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, a feeling that was both alien and exhilarating. I knew I shouldn't let him continue, that this was dangerous, that I was playing with fire, but I was mesmerized. "I want to elevate our connection," he said, his voice laced with a seductive urgency. "To create something truly extraordinary. Something that transcends the boundaries of art and life, something that will forever bind us together." He raised the blade, the moonlight glinting off its polished surface, and I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me. It was a terrible, terrifying sensation, but intertwined with it was an undeniable thrill, a fascination that drew me closer to the abyss. "This," he said, his voice a husky murmur, "this will be our masterpiece." He brought the blade to my arm, its sharp edge pressing against my skin. I felt a jolt of pain, a tingling sensation that spread through my body, and then, a searing pain as he drew a small, clean cut. I gasped, a mixture of pain and shock flooding through me, but he didn't stop. He drew another cut, then another, each one deeper than the last, each one leaving a trail of crimson on my skin. With each cut, I felt a strange rush of energy, a mingling of pain and pleasure that sent waves of sensation through my body. I was both terrified and aroused, a cocktail of emotions that was both exhilarating and terrifying. He looked at me, his eyes lit with a strange mixture of ecstasy and madness, and I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was in over my head. I felt the blade cut deeper, deeper, and a primal scream ripped through my throat. I could feel the warm blood flowing, staining my skin, my clothes, the white canvas that now lay beneath me like a sacrificial altar. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his voice hoarse with passion. "It's art." He continued to cut, carving into my flesh, each stroke a mix of pain and pleasure, each drop of blood a testament to our shared madness. We were lost in a whirlwind of passion and pain, a nightmarish symphony of beauty and horror, where love and fear danced a macabre waltz. Through the haze of pain and pleasure, I saw him, his face contorted with a fervent intensity, his eyes burning with a fire that reflected the crimson stain of my blood. It was a look that both terrified and enthralled me, a look that said he was lost to his art, consumed by his desire to create a masterpiece from the very essence of our connection. As the night wore on, the studio became a canvas for our madness, a testament to our twisted love affair. The air grew thick with the smell of blood and sweat, the walls adorned with new, macabre works of art, our bodies, our pain, our blood, all woven into a tapestry of grotesque beauty. The sun rose, casting a cold, pale light through the grimy windows, revealing the true extent of our passion, the true price of our artistic madness. I lay there, my body a canvas of crimson and pain, while he stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of satisfaction and regret. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his voice barely a whisper. "A true masterpiece." But as I looked at him, at the crimson stain on my skin, at the grotesque beauty of our creation, I realized that he had not created a masterpiece. He had created a monster. We were bound together by a twisted connection, a night of artistic madness that had left me scarred, both physically and emotionally. We were connected by blood, by pain, by a shared madness that had consumed us both. And in the cold, harsh light of dawn, I knew that we would never be able to escape the darkness we had created together. We were forever entwined, two souls bound by a love that was both beautiful and terrifying, a love that had been forged in blood and passion, a love that would forever haunt our souls. The Raven Studio, once a place of artistic brilliance, now stood as a chilling testament to our night of madness. The walls were still adorned with his paintings, a haunting collection of dark and twisted imagery. But now, they were overshadowed by the grotesque beauty of our creation, a reminder of the night we had danced with death and emerged forever changed. I left the studio that morning, my body a patchwork of crimson and pain, my heart heavy with a mixture of regret and longing. I knew I had to escape, to find a way to heal from the darkness that had consumed me. But even as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a strange pull back towards the studio, back towards the Raven, back towards the twisted love that had bound us so tightly together. The Raven, the artist, the madman, had captured my soul. He had shown me the darkness that lay within, and he had shown me the beauty that could be found in the grotesque. But he had also shown me the terrifying power of love, of passion, of the desire to create something truly extraordinary, even if it meant sacrificing everything. And as I walked away from the studio, I knew that the Raven would forever haunt me, a reminder of the night we had danced with death and emerged forever changed, forever connected by a love that was both beautiful and terrifying, a love that would forever scar my soul. We met in an underground club, a place whispered about in hushed tones, a place where the boundaries of acceptable behavior were blurred into oblivion. It was called the Labyrinth, and its reputation preceded it. They said it was a den of sin, a haven for the depraved, a playground for the wealthy and the reckless. I, ever the seeker of the forbidden, couldn't resist the allure. The air inside the club was thick with the scent of sweat and spilled liquor, a cacophony of pulsating bass and guttural screams. Bodies moved in a frantic, desperate dance, their faces painted with a mask of hedonism. I was drawn to her, a vision of dark beauty in the flickering neon light. Her eyes held a glint of steel, her lips a promise of danger. We locked eyes, two souls finding a kindred spirit in the abyss. "You're new here," she said, her voice a silken whisper that rasped against the cacophony. "I am," I replied, my throat dry with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Welcome to the Labyrinth," she said, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. "I'm Seraphina." She led me through the throng of bodies, towards a hidden doorway concealed behind a curtain of crimson velvet. The air grew colder as we passed through, the music fading into a muffled hum. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood. "This is where the real game begins," she said, her voice tinged with a trace of excitement. We entered a room that looked like a twisted parody of a boudoir, or perhaps a torture chamber. The walls were lined with instruments of pleasure and pain, whips, chains, clamps, and restraints. There was a faint leather aroma in the air, mixed with something metallic and strange. "Tonight we play a game," Seraphina said, her eyes blazing with a wild, untamed fire. "A game of trust and danger." I stood there, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was a world I had only glimpsed in nightmares, a realm of forbidden desires and unthinkable acts. But something within me, a primal hunger for the unknown, urged me to continue. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We push our boundaries," she said, her voice a low growl. We explore the depths of our desires, the limits of our endurance. And we do it together. She moved closer, her eyes burning into mine. Tonight, she said, her voice a seductive whisper, we leave our inhibitions behind. She pulled out a blindfold from the velvet pouch she carried, a heavy black silk that whispered against her skin. This is part of the game, she explained. We play blindfolded, trusting each other in the darkness. It's the only way to truly surrender, to truly let go. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a mixture of fear and anticipation. This was a dance with death, a thrilling yet terrifying experience. Are you ready? She asked, her voice a tantalizing invitation. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. This was the point of no return. Yes, I said, my voice shaky but firm. I'm ready. She wrapped the blindfold around my eyes, the silk cool against my skin. Everything went dark. The faint smell of leather and blood, the sounds of our shallow breaths, the muffled hum of the music in the distance, these were the only things that remained. I could feel her presence near me, her body radiating heat and a strange energy that pulsed through my veins. Trust me, she whispered, her voice a low murmur in the darkness. I closed my eyes, shutting out the last vestiges of the world. This was a journey into the unknown, a leap of faith into the abyss. The first few rounds of the game were a blur of sensations. I felt the sharp sting of the whip against my skin, the cold bite of metal on my flesh. The pain was intense, but it was also strangely exhilarating. It was a reminder of my vulnerability, a confirmation that I was truly experiencing something real, something raw and unfiltered. And then, there was the pleasure. The touch of her hands, the way her body moved against mine, the whispered promises in the darkness. It was a kaleidoscope of sensations, a dizzying mix of pain and ecstasy. I felt my body responding, my senses heightened, my mind consumed by the primal urge to give in. Each round pushed us further, the boundaries blurring, the line between pain and pleasure becoming a mere whisper. We explored the limits of our endurance, testing the boundaries of our sanity. The room became a battleground, a playground of extremes where we fought and surrendered, embraced and resisted. I felt the cold metal of the shackles against my wrists, the agonizing pressure of the clamps on my skin. But even as the pain intensified, a strange feeling of release washed over me. It was like I was shedding layers of myself, stripping away the armor that had protected me for so long. The night was a whirlwind of sensations, a dizzying mix of pleasure and pain, fear and excitement. We were two souls locked in a dance with death, our bodies intertwined in a ritual of passion and agony. And then it happened. The climax of the game, the moment we both knew was coming, the moment that would forever change us. It was a frenzy of blood and sweat, a symphony of screams and moans. We pushed ourselves to the very brink, and then, we crossed the line. I felt the warm sting of her teeth on my skin, the sharp bite of the blade against my flesh. It was a pain that was both exquisite and terrifying, a violation that felt like a baptism. I felt her shudder against me, her body convulsing with the intensity of the moment. The room was a whirlwind of blood and passion, a testament to the chaos that unfolded within its walls. When it was finally over, I lay there, my body aching, my mind reeling. I couldn't tell if I was alive or dead, if I was a victim or a participant. All I knew was that I had crossed a line I never knew existed. Serafina lay beside me, her breathing ragged, her eyes glazed over with a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. She reached out to touch my face, her fingers cool against my skin. "We did it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. I looked at her, my mind still struggling to process the events of the night. "We did," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I wasn't sure what had happened to me in that room, but I knew it had changed me. The experience had left me craving more, while simultaneously terrifying me. We left the club in the early hours of the morning, the city lights blurring in the haze of my exhaustion. I didn't speak, I didn't even look at her. I just walked, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The next few days were a blur, a chaotic mix of guilt, shame, and an overwhelming desire to return to that place. The scent of leather and blood lingered in my mind, the memory of her touch a constant burn against my skin. I was a man possessed, consumed by the night and the woman who had led me there. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a deal with the devil, a pact that would bind me to this world forever. I had tasted the forbidden, and now I craved it. I was a lost soul, wandering the streets of a city I no longer recognized, a victim of my own insatiable desire. And then she called. "I need you," she said, her voice a dangerous whisper. "There's a new game. We have to play it together." I knew I should have said no. I knew I should have run, escaped this dangerous world that had ensnared me. But the words wouldn't come. I felt a familiar pull, a beckoning force that I couldn't resist. "I'm coming," I said, my voice a hollow echo of my past self. I returned to the labyrinth, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. It felt like I was returning to a place I had never left, a world that had become a part of me, a dark secret that I could never escape. And as I walked through the door, I knew that this was just the beginning. The game had just begun. His obsession with me was a creeping vine, tendrils wrapping around my life, slowly choking out the air. It started with the whispers, the stolen glances, the lingering touches that lingered long after our interactions should have ended. Then came the gifts, a single red rose delivered anonymously, a box of chocolates with a single, chilling note. "You are beautiful. I want you." Each gift was more disturbing than the last. A hand-carved wooden doll with unsettlingly realistic eyes, a book of poetry with pages dog-eared and underlined, every poem a twisted confession of his desire. The gifts arrived with no sender, no return address, only a silent, haunting presence that clung to me like a shadow. He was a ghost, a specter weaving through the fringes of my life, and he was terrifyingly, undeniably obsessed. He found me online, I learned later, a simple message on a forum, a comment on a picture I'd posted. It was a seed planted in fertile ground, a seed that sprouted, grew, and threatened to devour me entirely. He knew my name, my hobbies, my deepest fears, and he used this knowledge like a weapon. The climax, the culmination of his obsession, came in the form of an email, a single line. "Come. I'll show you a night you'll never forget." It was a proposition, a dare, a threat whispered in digital ink. I knew I shouldn't go, yet there was a morbid curiosity, an almost irresistible pull, that I couldn't ignore. He knew I'd come. He provided an address, a sprawling mansion nestled deep in the countryside, a Gothic pile that loomed over the landscape like a brooding shadow. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, and the silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. As I approached, a single light flickered on in one of the windows, a solitary beacon in the vast darkness. The door creaked open as I arrived, a warm, unsettling welcome. The interior of the mansion was a labyrinth of dark corridors and elaborate rooms. The air hung heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something metallic, something unsettlingly familiar. He was waiting for me in the grand hall, bathed in the soft light of a single oil lamp, a smile playing on his lips. "You came," he said, his voice a low, melodic purr. His eyes were a deep shade of blue, almost black in the dim light, holding a glint of something predatory, something that made my blood run cold. I tried to speak, to tell him I was leaving, but the words wouldn't come. He was too close, his presence too overwhelming. He held me captive with his gaze, a gaze that seemed to strip away my defenses, leaving me raw and vulnerable. He led me through the mansion, each room a tableau of his twisted desires. A library filled with books on obscure rituals, a room dedicated to taxidermy, the animals frozen in grotesque poses, a music room where a single piano stood silent, its ivory keys untouched. And then, the descent into the depths of his obsession, a hidden room tucked away behind a dusty tapestry. It was a chamber of horrors, a sanctuary of pain, a testament to his twisted fantasy. Chains hung from the ceiling, whips lay coiled on the floor, and knives gleamed under the flickering lamplight. "This is my sanctuary," he whispered, his voice a caress, a threat. Where I can be myself, where I can explore, you. He began to unbutton his shirt, revealing a body that was both powerful and disturbing. He had an air of restrained violence, a dangerous allure that emanated from him like a tangible force. He led me through a series of rituals that were both erotic and terrifying. He bound me with the chains, the cool metal biting into my flesh. He whipped me with the leather, the sting a sharp, exhilarating pain. He held the knife to my throat, the cold steel a chilling reminder of his power. He confessed his darkest desires, his fantasies of domination, of control, of absolute power over another human being. It was both repulsive and undeniably alluring. The pain, the fear, the thrill, they all intertwined, weaving a tapestry of sensations that was both intoxicating and terrifying. It was a symphony of darkness, a dance with a predator, a descent into the depths of my own desires. As the night wore on, the boundaries between pain and pleasure blurred. I felt a strange, inexplicable longing, an attraction to the danger, to the power he wielded over me. It was a twisted, forbidden connection that I could neither deny nor comprehend. The room was a battlefield of our desires, a clash of wills, a symphony of pain and pleasure. We were both players in a dangerous game, each of us pushing the boundaries, testing the limits of our own morality. The night ended with a mix of exhaustion and a strange sense of emptiness. He'd left me alone, with nothing but the scent of his cologne and the cold metallic taste of fear on my tongue. I stumbled out of the mansion, the shadows seeming to close in around me, the silence heavy with the memory of the night's events. There was a part of me, a part that I fought to deny, that craved more, that longed for the dangerous intimacy of that night. But another part, a stronger part, recoiled in horror, filled with revulsion at the depths of my own depravity. The obsession continued, his presence a constant, heavy shadow in my life. He sent me more gifts, more twisted confessions, each a reminder of the night that had changed everything. But the fear, the disgust, it was stronger than the allure, stronger than the desire. He had awakened a dark side within me, a side I was determined to bury, to eradicate. I escaped. I fled the city, the state, the country, desperate to outrun the shadows that haunted me, the memory of the night that had both captivated and terrified me. He found me again, of course. He always did. He knew my weaknesses, my fears, and he used them against me. But I fought back. I fought for my sanity, for my freedom, for the right to be free from his obsession. I fought with a ferocity I never knew I possessed. I exposed him, I laid bare his darkness, his warped desires. I broke his hold over me, shattering the spell he'd cast over my life. He disappeared, his obsession vanished, but the shadows remained. They clung to me, a constant reminder of the night that had forever changed me. The memories, the pain, the fear, the twisted longing, it all remained, a constant torment, a testament to the darkness that can reside in the human heart, and the lengths to which it can drive us. It was a dangerous liaison, a night that forever changed me, leaving me forever torn between revulsion and the inexplicable longing for more. I found him during my travels, in a dusty, forgotten corner of Morocco. He wasn't what I expected. No flamboyant robes, no glittering jewels, no imposing physique. Just a man, average in build, with eyes that held a depth that could swallow you whole. He spoke in a low, raspy voice, his words laced with an alluring danger that sent shivers down my spine. He called himself Idris, and he spoke of ancient rituals, whispers of forgotten gods, of the ultimate pleasure that could be achieved through pain. He painted a vivid picture of a world where the senses were heightened, where ecstasy and agony were intertwined in a dance of exquisite torment. The very idea of it was both terrifying and exhilarating, a forbidden fruit I couldn't resist taking a bite from. "It is not for the faint of heart," he warned, his eyes burning into mine. "It demands sacrifice, a willingness to push beyond the boundaries of what you believe possible." I was not faint of heart. I was a woman who lived on the edge, pushing the boundaries of my own comfort zone, seeking the extraordinary in the mundane. Idris's words ignited a spark within me, a primal curiosity that whispered, "What if?" He led me to a secluded valley, hidden behind towering cliffs, where the air hummed with an intangible energy. The moon, a pale disk in the inky sky, cast long, skeletal shadows that danced around us. Idris, with the practiced ease of a seasoned performer, laid out the tools of the ritual: a silver blade, a worn leather-bound book, and a small bowl filled with a dark, viscous liquid. My pulse quickened as he explained the steps, his voice a hypnotic murmur against the whispering wind. The ritual was a dance of pain and pleasure, a delicate balance between the physical and the spiritual. He spoke of the ancient gods, of their thirst for sacrifice, and of the divine ecstasy that awaited those who dared to appease them. The first step was the bloodletting, a small incision made on my forearm, the blood offered as a tribute to the gods. It was a simple gesture, yet the sight of the crimson liquid dripping onto the parched earth sent a surge of primal energy through me. Then came the incantations, a series of ancient words chanted in a language that resonated deep within my soul, stirring something primal and untamed. Idris's voice, a powerful instrument, filled the valley, weaving a tapestry of sound that both terrified and comforted me. With each step, the ritual grew more intense, the air thickening with a palpable energy. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if my body was a vessel, an empty shell, being manipulated by an unseen force. As the ritual reached its climax, the pain became unbearable. The silver blade, guided by Idris's steady hand, traced a path across my skin, leaving a trail of crimson in its wake. The pain was exquisite, a sharp, searing sensation that sent waves of heat and fire through my veins. Yet, strangely, it was also pleasurable, a strange, addictive sensation that pulled me deeper into the abyss. With each cut, my senses sharpened, my vision blurring at the edges as if a veil had been lifted. I felt the world around me in a way I had never experienced before, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the rustling of leaves a symphony of whispers in my ears. Idris's eyes, which had been distant and focused, softened as he met mine. There was a tenderness in his gaze, a recognition of the shared experience that bound us together. His hands, strong yet gentle, held me close, guiding me through the final stages of the ritual. And then, there was the blood. Blood mixed with the dark liquid from the bowl, a potent mixture that painted our bodies in a crimson tapestry. It was a release, a surrender to the primal forces that surged through us. We were bound, not by chains or ropes, but by the shared pain, the shared ecstasy. As the ritual reached its zenith, the world around us melted away. The valley, once a place of isolation, became a sacred space, imbued with a potent energy that pulsed through every fiber of our beings. We were no longer two individuals, but a single entity, our bodies intertwined in a dance of passion and pain, a symphony of pleasure and agony. The world spun, the air hummed, and a wave of euphoria washed over me, a feeling of pure, unadulterated bliss that transcended all earthly boundaries. It was a moment of sublime ecstasy, a glimpse into a realm beyond comprehension, where the limits of human experience were shattered. When the ritual finally ended, I was exhausted, my body trembling with a strange mixture of exhilaration and fear. The world felt different, the colors brighter, the sounds sharper. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a world I had never been able to see before. Idris, his face pale and drawn, looked at me with a mixture of pity and admiration. He had seen the darkness in my soul, the yearning for something more, and he had offered me a glimpse into a world beyond my wildest dreams. "You have tasted the forbidden fruit," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The thirst will never be quenched. You will always crave more." He didn't lie. The experience left a permanent mark on me, a scar on my soul that could never be erased. I had tasted the forbidden, and the taste lingered, a potent reminder of the depths of human experience, the beauty and the terror, the ecstasy and the agony. The world felt different now. I was no longer the same person. The boundaries of my own comfort zone had been shattered, and I was left standing on the precipice of something unknown, a world where the line between pleasure and pain had become blurred beyond recognition. The ritual had changed me. It had opened me up to new possibilities, new experiences, new ways of seeing the world. But it had also left me with a lingering sense of unease, a fear that I would never be able to shake. The thirst that Idris had spoken of, the craving for the forbidden, had taken root within me, a constant reminder of the power of the ritual, the darkness that lurks beneath the surface. I returned to my travels, but I was never truly the same. The memory of the night in the valley, of the blood, the pain, the ecstasy, haunted me. The world, once so familiar, now seemed imbued with a hidden significance, a secret language that whispered promises of forbidden pleasures and terrible consequences. Idris had led me to a place beyond human understanding, a place where the boundaries of reality dissolved, where the pleasure of pain and the agony of ecstasy intertwined in a macabre dance. I walked away changed, forever marked by the experience, forever haunted by the memory. I had tasted the forbidden, and the taste lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that lies within us all, the insatiable hunger for something more, something beyond the realm of the ordinary. And in the darkest corners of my mind, I knew that I would seek it out again, driven by a thirst that could never be quenched, a hunger for the forbidden, for the raw, unfiltered experience of life. The year had been a brutal one. A gaping hole had been torn in my life, leaving behind an unbearable emptiness that no amount of grief counseling could fill. It had been a year since my wife, Sarah, was murdered, the investigation a cold case, the killer still at large. I was left to pick up the pieces, a single father trying to navigate the treacherous waters of grief and the daunting responsibility of raising 2 young children. Kathy, my daughter, was only 2 when her mother was taken from us. The vibrant energy that had once filled her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a quiet sadness. James, my baby boy, was just 6 months old when Sarah was murdered. He had never known the warmth of his mother's embrace, and I feared the future he would grow up into without her love. Work became my sanctuary, a way to escape the suffocating loneliness of my apartment. I was a lawyer, a profession that required a sharp mind and a detached demeanor. It was a shield, a way to keep the raw, unfiltered pain at bay. But the shield was thin, and the cracks were beginning to show. My nights were spent in a haze of insomnia, the nightmares relentless, replaying the night Sarah was taken, the memory of her cold, lifeless body a constant companion. One day, while aimlessly scrolling through Facebook during a lull in my work, I stumbled upon Nancy's profile. Her photo was a simple one, capturing the kind eyes and gentle smile that emanated from her posts. She was a widow, about my age, with a profile picture featuring her with 2 children. Curiosity piqued, I clicked on her page. As I scrolled through her photos, I saw images of children, laughing, playing, their faces etched with joy. It was something I had longed for, a glimpse of a world where children were cherished, where their laughter was a constant melody in a happy home. Nancy worked at an orphanage, a place where she dedicated her time to caring for children who had lost their parents. In her profile, she wrote about the joy she found in fostering a sense of love and stability in the lives of these children, giving them the chance to experience the warmth of a family. There was something about her, a quiet strength and unwavering compassion, that drew me in, echoing the longing I felt for a steady hand to hold, for a love to fill the void that had been carved in my heart. The first hesitant chat led to longer conversations, sharing our stories, our struggles, and our hopes for the future. Nancy became a beacon in the darkness, a soothing voice that calmed the storm raging within me. We talked about our shared grief, the pain of losing someone we loved, and the challenges of raising children alone. As the weeks turned into months, our conversations became more frequent. We learned about each other's lives, our dreams and aspirations. We shared our fears and insecurities, finding solace in the understanding that we were not alone in our pain. We spoke about our children, about Kathy's quiet demeanor, and James's infectious laughter. Nancy, too, had lost a young daughter, and her empathy for my children was profound. One evening, a month after our first conversation, I confessed my feelings. I told her I was drawn to her warmth, her resilience, and the love she exuded. I told her that I was lonely, that I craved the comfort of a loving presence in my life. I asked her if she would consider marrying me, offering her a family, a chance to heal and love again. To my surprise, she said yes. A tear rolled down my cheek, a single drop of hope in the ocean of despair that had engulfed me. Nancy moved into my apartment a few weeks later. I watched, with a grateful heart, as she interacted with my children, her warmth and patience melting the ice that had formed around Kathy's heart. She played with James, her laughter echoing through the apartment, filling the void that had been left by Sarah's absence. Life felt like it was slowly getting back on track. There were still moments of sadness, reminders of the past that lingered like a ghost. But there was also a flicker of light, a promise of a future where love could blossom once more. One Tuesday afternoon, the phone buzzed in my office. It was Nancy. Her voice was tight with fear, her words barely audible. "Kathy's missing," she choked out. The blood drained from my face, a cold dread taking root in my stomach. I could barely speak, my voice a hollow echo in my ear as I asked what had happened. She explained that Kathy had been playing in the park with some other children while she was cleaning the apartment. When she went back to the park, Kathy was gone. Panic clawed at my throat, a wave of terror washing over me. We immediately called the local sheriff's department, but their investigation yielded nothing. The days became weeks, and the weeks turned into months, but there was no sign of Kathy. The search for my daughter became an all-consuming obsession, consuming every waking moment. One evening, I arrived home earlier than usual. As I reached for the doorknob, I noticed something strange. It was covered in a thick, sticky substance, crimson red in the fading light. My heart pounded in my chest, a chilling premonition settling in my gut. The key turned in the lock with a terrifying ease, the door opening with a sickening creak. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. In the dim light of the hallway, I saw them. My wife, Nancy, sat at the kitchen table, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. Beside her sat another woman, her face obscured by the shadows. They were both eating something raw, the sight of it making my stomach churn. It was then that I saw him. James, my son, was nowhere to be seen. The world around me dissolved into a deafening silence. The blood-stained doorknob, the strange woman, the raw food, and the absence of my son, it was all too much. My mind reeled, trying to piece together the confusing fragments of a reality that was rapidly spiraling into a nightmare. "Nancy? What's going on? Where is James?" I spoke, my voice a thin, strained whisper. Nancy looked up, her eyes betraying a chilling mixture of fear and something else, something sinister. The woman beside her remained silent, her face still hidden in the shadows. "He's safe," Nancy said, her voice a raspy whisper. "But he's not your son anymore." The woman beside Nancy finally turned, revealing her face. It was a face I recognized from the Facebook profile, the one that had drawn me to her, the one that had promised love and stability. But the woman who stared back at me was unrecognizable. Her eyes were cold and hollow, her expression devoid of warmth or compassion. "This is your daughter, Kathy," she said, her voice cold and menacing. "And this," she gestured towards the raw food on the table, "is what you will be eating for the rest of your life." My mind, overwhelmed by the sheer terror of the situation, struggled to process the horrifying implications of her words. They had taken my daughter, my son, and now they were replacing him with another child. They were taking my life piece by piece, twisting it into a brutal parody of the happiness I had once craved. "What have you done to them?" I choked out, my voice trembling with fear and desperation. "Where are they? Tell me where they are." The woman laughed, a chilling, hollow sound that echoed through the apartment. "They are safe, for now," she said. "But their fate rests in your hands." The raw food on the table pulsated with an unnatural, sickening glow. As I stared at it, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. What was that substance? What had they done to my children? My mind, already fractured by terror, started to unravel. The rain was a relentless drumbeat against the window, a symphony of despair echoing my own turmoil. I sat across from her, the flickering candlelight highlighting the sharp angles of her face, the seductive curve of her lips. She was everything I'd ever wanted, brilliant, witty, with an aura of mystery that drew me in like a moth to a flame. We'd been together for 6 months, a whirlwind romance fueled by stolen glances, whispered secrets, and the intoxicating thrill of forbidden passion. It had all started with a chance encounter at a swanky art gallery opening. She was captivating, a vision in a scarlet dress, her laughter a cascade of music. My usual cynicism melted away, replaced by a heady desire. We exchanged numbers, and what began as casual dinners evolved into late-night conversations, stolen kisses, and the promise of a future we both knew couldn't be. Her name was Evelyn, but I called her Eve. She was a lawyer, a rising star in the legal world, her reputation preceding her. I, a struggling writer, found myself captivated by her world of intricate legal battles and high-stakes negotiations. We were an unlikely pair, but the chemistry was undeniable. But there were shadows, whispers of a past she wouldn't discuss. There were late-night calls she'd take in hushed tones, her demeanor changing, becoming colder, more calculating. I brushed it off as professional stress, the burden of her demanding career. Then came the night the truth, like a chilling wind, swept away my illusions. It was a Tuesday, our usual night for a quiet dinner at a local bistro. She was unusually quiet, her eyes distant. I attributed it to a tense case she was handling, but as the evening progressed, I noticed an oddly detached air about her. "There's something you're not telling me, Eve," I said, my voice tight with unease. "What's going on?" She met my gaze, her eyes cold and calculating. "There's nothing to tell, darling," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Just a few matters that need my attention. Don't worry about it, I'll be back soon." The following day, news broke of a high-profile murder. A prominent businessman, a man named Arthur Caldwell, had been found dead in his office, his death ruled as suicide. Eve, in her usual professional brilliance, dominated the news, representing the deceased's family. As I watched her on the television, her face unreadable, a deep unease coiled in my gut. A seed of suspicion had been planted, and it wouldn't be silenced. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and suspicion. I obsessively studied her every move, every phone call, every email. The whispers of her past, the late-night phone calls, the cold, calculating glint in her eyes, all of it started to make sense. I began to meticulously research the Caldwell case, poring over every article, every interview. There were inconsistencies, strange details that didn't add up. I noticed a pattern in the way Eve manipulated the media, directing the narrative in a way that pointed towards suicide. A sudden urge to unmask her, to expose the truth, consumed me. Then came the night that shattered everything. Eve had gone to a gala, a high society event she was attending with a client. I was left alone in our apartment, the emptiness echoing my growing desperation. I decided to dig deeper, to break into her email account. It was a reckless decision, driven by a desperate need to prove my suspicions. The emails were chilling. They revealed a side of Eve I never knew existed. She wasn't just a brilliant lawyer, she was a ruthless femme fatale, a master manipulator, capable of anything to achieve her goals. The emails detailed a web of deceit, of manipulation, of murder. The Caldwell case, the suicide ruled by the police, was a carefully orchestrated act. Eve had used her charm, her intelligence, her legal expertise, to play the victim, to manipulate the truth, to silence a man who threatened to expose her secrets. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The woman I loved, the woman I had entrusted my heart to, was a monster in disguise. My blood ran cold. I had to expose her, to warn the world about the danger she posed. But I was too late. The phone rang, her voice, a familiar melody laced with a chilling edge, pierced the silence of the apartment. "Darling, I'm home," she said. "But I'll need your help. There's something you need to know, something very important." My heart pounded in my chest. I could hear her unlocking the door, her footsteps approaching. "Eve, I know," I whispered, my voice shaky. I know everything. She laughed, a chilling, brittle sound that sent shivers down my spine. Oh, you don't know everything, darling, she said, her voice dripping with icy venom. Not even close. She entered the apartment, her face a mask of icy calm. She moved towards me, her eyes fixed on mine, holding an almost hypnotic power. You see, darling, there are some things even love cannot conquer, she said, her voice a cruel whisper, as cold as the steel glinting in her hand. She plunged the knife into my chest, a swift, merciless movement that sent a searing wave of pain through me. I choked on my own blood, my eyes wide with shock and betrayal. Just a little accident, darling, she said, her voice a sweet symphony of death, her eyes gleaming with twisted satisfaction. Now you can keep my secret forever. As darkness closed in, my world crumbled around me, leaving behind a bitter truth. I had been the fool, the victim of a love that was as deadly as it was intoxicating. My last thought, a whisper of despair, was a simple plea. How could you? The rain continued its mournful symphony, washing away the evidence, swallowing my screams, leaving only the silence of a life brutally silenced. The world would never know the truth about Eve, the ruthless femme fatale, the woman who wore a mask of love to hide the monster within. But I knew. And in my final moments, I knew the terrifying truth. Love, in its most insidious form, could be a weapon more deadly than any knife. My boss's request to stay late turned into a nightmare when I was lured to the office basement under the guise of an urgent task. Instead, I walked into a scene of carnage. My date, who had disappeared weeks ago, was gruesomely displayed as a warning. The terror sank in. I'd never make it out alive. It was a dreary Tuesday evening, the kind that bled into an endless abyss of paperwork and deadlines. I was already mentally clocking out, counting down the minutes until I could be out of the office and into the comforting embrace of my apartment. Just as I was about to pack my things, the office door creaked open, and Michael, my boss, stepped inside, his face a mask of solemn urgency. Sarah, I need you to stay late tonight, he said, his voice a hushed whisper. There's a matter that needs immediate attention. My stomach lurched. It was unusual for Michael to require anyone to stay late, and his vague wording only heightened my apprehension. Despite my protest, a silent, unspoken fear propelled me to comply. I knew better than to defy him. He led me to the back of the office, past the rows of empty cubicles where my colleagues had already left for the day. The air grew heavy with the smell of stale coffee and something else, something acrid and metallic that made my throat tighten. We finally stopped at a door located near the mailroom, a door that I had never noticed before. There's a problem with the server downstairs, he said, his voice raspy. It needs immediate troubleshooting. I know it's late, but I need your expertise on this. I swallowed hard, my gaze fixed on the door. The basement. It was always locked, a forbidden zone within the office. As the door creaked open, a wave of cold air hit me, carrying with it a faint whiff of something putrid. A shiver ran down my spine. Go ahead, Sarah. I'll be right behind you, Michael said, his voice barely audible above the deafening silence. I'll just grab some tools. Hesitantly, I stepped inside the basement, my heart pounding against my ribs. The air was thick and heavy, and a musty, earthy scent filled my nostrils. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and twisted on the concrete walls. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, a horrifying tableau unfolded before me. In the center of the basement, illuminated by a single, flickering spotlight, hung a figure. My breath caught in my throat. It was him. Ben. My date. The same man who had mysteriously vanished weeks ago, leaving behind a trail of unanswered calls and unanswered messages. Ben was bound and gagged, his body contorted at an unnatural angle. His once vibrant blue eyes were now glazed and empty, his face a canvas of terror and pain. Blood, thick and sticky, coated his pale skin, staining the ragged burlap that bound him. A single, sharp knife protruded from his chest, its gleaming blade reflecting the weak light above. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I retched, the taste of bile stinging my throat. The scene was horrifying, gruesome, a macabre masterpiece of violence. It felt unreal, like a scene from a nightmare. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of life, any indication of what had happened. The walls were plastered with disturbing images, photographs of mutilated bodies, graphic sketches of torture methods, and disturbing phrases scrawled in blood-red paint. The air was heavy with the stench of decay and the palpable sense of impending doom. I spun around, my eyes searching for a way out. The door I had entered through was now closed, the hinges groaning ominously. I ran towards it, my heart pounding against my chest, my lungs burning for air. "You're not going anywhere," a voice spoke from the darkness. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins. The voice was low and menacing, a whisper that seemed to slither through the air. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by the darkness. He was tall and wiry, his movements fluid and unnerving. A single dim light glinted off a sharp blade in his hand. "Welcome to my little plaything," he said, his voice a chilling rasp. "You're a late addition to the cast." The terror I had been suppressing finally exploded, a wave of pure, primal fear that left me paralyzed. I could only stare at him, my mind racing, my body frozen in place. He chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You were a fool to think you could escape this," he said, his eyes glinting with a sinister amusement. "This was never about a server. This was about you." He advanced towards me, his steps slow and measured, his eyes never leaving mine. The blade in his hand glinted menacingly under the dim light. "Don't worry," he said, his voice a cruel whisper. "You'll get to join your little friend. And then we'll have a proper party." He raised his blade, its sharp edge reflecting the flickering light. The air hung heavy with the smell of metal and blood. With a roar of terror, I lunged forward, desperate to escape. I stumbled, my feet tangled in the loose wires and debris scattered on the floor. He was upon me in an instant, his blade flashing through the air. A burning pain erupted in my shoulder, and I screamed, a guttural cry of agony and fear. I hit the ground, my body collapsing under the weight of the attack. The world seemed to tilt around me, the floor swirling beneath my feet. I lay there, my breath shallow and ragged, the searing pain in my shoulder a constant reminder of my imminent demise. The figure stood over me, his shadow stretching across the floor, his blade gleaming under the dim light. "You were a foolish, naive girl," he said, his voice laced with a cruel, twisted amusement. "But you were good for a little fun." He leaned down, his warm breath washing over my face, a sickly sweet odor that made me gag. "You thought you were smart," he whispered, his voice a chilling whisper. "You thought you were playing a game. But you never stood a chance." He pressed the blade against my throat, the cold steel a stark contrast to the warmth of my blood. The world seemed to shrink, my vision blurring at the edges. "Good luck finding your way out of this one," he said, his voice a final, mocking echo. My vision faded to black, the world dissolving into a sea of darkness. The last thing I saw was the glint of his blade, the metal reflecting the dim light from above. I woke up to the blinding light of a hospital room. The sterile white walls and the constant beeping of monitors brought a stark reality to my situation. I was alive. But alive and broken. My body was a mosaic of pain, the remnants of the attack a constant reminder of the nightmare I had endured. I remembered everything. The basement, the gruesome display, the chilling words of my tormentor. The police investigation was a blur, filled with frustrated detectives and a string of unanswered questions. They found Ben's body, but the killer was nowhere to be found. The basement was sealed off, the evidence carefully collected. The police were convinced it was a case of a disgruntled employee, but the evidence pointed to something far more insidious. This wasn't about a workplace dispute. It was a premeditated act of violence, a twisted game of cat and mouse orchestrated by a predator who reveled in the terror he inflicted. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. The man who had tortured and left me for dead was out there, somewhere, watching. Waiting. The police called him the basement butcher, a moniker that sent chills down my spine. My escape was a mere stroke of luck, a moment of hesitation that had allowed me to dodge the fatal blow. But I knew he wouldn't be satisfied until he finished what he started. My life was forever altered. The fear was a constant companion, a shadow that clung to me, never allowing me to forget. I moved, changed jobs, tried to start anew. But the terror never left. The basement butcher was out there. He was a part of my life, a dark presence that haunted my every waking moment. I knew it was only a matter of time until he came back for me. And I was going to be ready for him. The phone rang, shattering the silence of my new apartment. My hand trembled as I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice strained. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the receiver. "Hello, Sarah," the voice said, the familiar rasp sending chills down my spine. "Remember me?" The blood drained from my face. The basement butcher. He was back. "We have unfinished business," he said, his voice dripping with icy malice. "And this time, I'm coming for you." The phone went dead. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I was trapped in a game with a predator who played by his own rules. This time, I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't be a pawn in his twisted game. I would fight back. I was going to hunt the hunter. The terror was still there, a constant shadow that lurked at the edges of my mind. But now, I was fueled by a primal rage, a burning desire for vengeance. The basement butcher had messed with the wrong girl. I was going to make him pay. Every midnight my neighbor's dogs screamed outside, dragging me from sleep. It was a symphony of howls and yelps, a cacophony that pierced the night and clawed its way into my dreams, turning them into nightmares. The first few times I thought it was the usual nocturnal commotion, a stray cat, a startled owl, the city's symphony of distant sirens. But as the nights wore on, the screams intensified, more frantic, more desperate. They became the soundtrack of my sleeplessness, an unwelcome lullaby that haunted my every waking moment. Mr. Hawthorne, my neighbor, was a recluse. I had only seen him a couple of times, a gaunt figure with haunted eyes and a nervous twitch. He lived alone in a cluttered, ramshackle Victorian house that seemed to shrink further into itself with every passing year. The only life around his home were his dogs, 5 German shepherds, whose barks echoed with an almost human cruelty. My patience was wearing thin. Sleep was becoming a luxury I couldn't afford. I tried everything: earplugs, white noise machines, even the dubious technique of counter-conditioning, where I played soothing music in an attempt to drown out the night terrors. Nothing worked. The howls were relentless. One morning, driven by frustration and the desperate need for sleep, I stood at my window, the worn fabric of my pajamas clinging to my damp skin. My head was pounding, my eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. Just then, the familiar symphony of screams rose from the darkness. I gritted my teeth, ready to confront them, to demand they be quiet. I pulled back the curtain, my heart pounding in my chest. My voice died in my throat. My fear hit me hard, a wave that washed over me, leaving me gasping for air. My neighbor, Mr. Hawthorne, stood in his backyard, bathed in the pale glow of the street light. He was naked, his pale skin covered in a glistening sheen of blood. The dogs, their fur matted with gore, were huddled around him, their eyes gleaming with an unsettlingly primal intensity. I watched, paralyzed with terror, as Mr. Hawthorne raised a cleaver, its blade glinting menacingly in the moonlight. The scene before me was a macabre tableau, a nightmare sprung to life. In the center of the yard, a large, muddy patch seemed to pulsate with a sickening, bloody hue. It was a gruesome mosaic of animal parts, intestines spilling out in a grotesque tangle, fur, bone fragments, the severed head of a rabbit, its vacant eyes staring up at the night sky. The air was thick with the acrid tang of blood and the overwhelming stench of death. Mr. Hawthorne, his face expressionless, his movements as rhythmic as a macabre dance, began to hack at the carcass of a dog, its body writhing in a final spasm of pain. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat and forced myself to look away. The sight, the sound, the stench, it overwhelmed me, a visceral assault that left me trembling with terror. I stumbled back from the window, my knees nearly giving way. What I had witnessed transcended everything I had ever imagined. It was beyond comprehension, beyond reason. My neighbor wasn't just a recluse, a man with barking dogs. He was a monster, a creature of the night, feeding on the blood of the innocent. The dogs, sensing my withdrawal, began to bark, their voices like the snarls of demons. I heard the guttural rasp of Mr. Hawthorne's voice rising above the cacophony, a low, animalistic growl that sent chills down my spine. I knew in that moment that I couldn't stay silent. This was a horror I couldn't ignore, a nightmare that had leaked into the real world. But how could I, a single, ordinary woman, confront this monstrous entity? What evidence could I offer? What proof could I provide? The scene outside my window, a living testament to his depravity, was a secret he would take to his grave. Days turned into weeks, and the nightmare continued. Every night the screams would rise, their terror echoing through the darkness. Every night, I would pull back the curtains, my heart pounding in my chest, hoping against hope that the night before was just a bad dream. But the reality was always there, waiting for me, a bloody, snarling monster lurking in the shadows of my neighbor's backyard. The fear gnawed at me, a constant, aching presence. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on my work. The constant dread seeped into every aspect of my life, transforming my once peaceful existence into a living hell. I searched for answers, for any shred of information that could explain the unimaginable horror unfolding next door. I scoured the internet, searching for local news stories, for any hint of a missing animal case. But there was nothing. It was as if the bloodbath happening in my neighbor's backyard was a secret shared only by the night and the stars. Then, one day, I stumbled upon a faded newspaper article in the local library archives. It was a story from the 1960s, about a man named William Hawthorne, who had been accused of animal cruelty and had mysteriously disappeared. The name, the year, it all fit. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could this be the same William Hawthorne? Could this man, with a history of disturbing behavior, be the monster in my neighbor's house? Fueled by this newfound information, I started to investigate. I talked to the local historian, who confirmed that William Hawthorne had indeed lived in the house, but had disappeared after the charges against him were dropped due to lack of evidence. He had vanished without a trace, leaving a trail of whispers and rumors in his wake. Then, I decided to take a bolder step. I started to document the events, meticulously noting the times of the screams, the frequency of the noises, and the gruesome details of the bloodbath I had witnessed. I felt a wave of nausea as I typed the words, but I knew I had to do something. I had to put an end to this nightmare. One night, as the screams reached their crescendo, I called the police. I told them everything I had seen, everything I had learned. They listened, their faces a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. I could see their doubt in their eyes, the skepticism that I was a troubled woman, making up stories to satisfy a disturbed imagination. But I persisted. I showed them my handwritten notes, the newspaper article about William Hawthorne. I pressed them to investigate, to take action before this man's depravity spread beyond his backyard. As the officers headed towards my neighbor's house, I watched from my window, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I had done everything I could. I had faced my fear, exposed the truth, and stepped into the darkness to confront the monster. The sirens wailed in the distance as the police approached the house. In the flickering light of the street lamps, I saw the silhouette of a tall, gaunt figure standing in the doorway, his face obscured by the shadows. The dogs, their barks echoing in the night, were gathered around him, their eyes reflecting the red and blue lights of the arriving police cars. I closed my eyes, willing the nightmare to end. It was a fight I had started, a battle against the darkness that had seeped into my life. My prayers were answered. The police came back to tell me about the horrifying truth they discovered, the grisly details of the crimes, the monster they apprehended. They promised me justice, a promise that brought a semblance of peace back into my life. But even as the nightmare subsided, the fear remained. The chilling screams, the blood-soaked yard, the gaunt figure in the doorway, these images haunted my dreams. Her porcelain skin, stark against the pristine white linen, was a canvas of shadows and light, a map of hidden desires. I sat across from her, my heart a trapped bird in my chest, a nervous flutter against the backdrop of her silent, seductive gaze. The room, an opulent chamber of silk and shadows, was a stage set for a drama I knew I had no right to be a part of. But here I was, captivated, compelled, my senses drowning in the intoxicating cocktail of fear and exhilaration that she so effortlessly brewed. The scent of jasmine and something dark, almost metallic, hung heavy in the air. It was a peculiar combination that seemed to perfectly capture the dichotomy of her being, her beauty laced with a dangerous undercurrent, her vulnerability laced with a chilling fearlessness. My eyes, drawn to her like a moth to a flame, focused on the silver knife resting on the table beside her. It was an incongruous element in this scene of hushed intimacy, a stark reminder of the power she wielded, of the danger that danced on the periphery of this intoxicating game. She didn't speak, not a single word, but her silence was a symphony, a chorus of unspoken desires and suppressed secrets. Her smile, a tantalizing curve of crimson lips, was a whispered invitation, a promise of both pleasure and pain, a promise of a journey into the heart of the unknown. And I, a fool drawn by the siren's call, succumbed to its allure. The silence was broken with a rustle of satin as she shifted, the silken sheets slipping away, revealing the curve of her shoulder, the fragile line of her spine. My breath caught in my throat, a gasp trapped in the confines of my own growing fear. The knife, glistening in the soft light filtering through the heavy drapes, was picked up, its blade catching the light in a deadly dance. "Come closer!" Her voice, a velvety whisper, was a siren's song, a seductive threat. I obeyed, my steps hesitant, my eyes fixed on the glinting blade, the delicate line of her throat. She held the knife like a lover would hold a rose, its cold edge a cruel contrast to the warmth of her touch. It was a weapon, a symbol of power, but it was also a tool of seduction, a whispered threat that intensified the allure of her dangerous game. The knife was a language we both understood, a silent conversation of power and desire. With a delicate hand she traced the edge along the back of her neck, a gesture both defiant and vulnerable, a dangerous invitation. A shiver ran down my spine, the thrill of fear mixing with an intoxicating curiosity, an insatiable need to understand the darkness that simmered beneath her beautiful facade. Her eyes, the color of stormy skies, met mine, a challenge in their depths. "Do you want to explore?" she whispered, her voice a low rumble, the tone husky with suppressed desire. The word, explore, was a dangerous invitation. It was a promise of a journey into the unknown, a descent into the abyss of her hidden desires. And I, a fool enthralled to her intoxicating charm, accepted. She didn't flinch as I moved closer, my hand trembling as I caressed the smooth expanse of her back. My fingers traced the path of the blade, its coldness a stark contrast to the warmth of her skin. The knife was a barrier, a line drawn in the sand, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked beneath the surface of this intoxicating game. "Touch me," she breathed, her voice a silken whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Embrace the thrill of the unknown." Her words were a challenge, a command, a dangerous game she was leading me to play. The knife, a constant presence, heightened the thrill of the encounter, turning a simple touch into something raw and dangerous. Her skin, beneath my fingertips, was both fragile and resilient, a delicate bloom on a thorny vine. Her touch, a light graze of fingertips against my cheek, was a spark that ignited an inferno within me. The knife, a constant reminder of the boundary between pleasure and pain, was a conduit, a channel through which our desires flowed. I knew this was a dangerous path, a slippery slope into the abyss, but I was already too far in, too consumed by the intoxicating allure of her danger. It was a tango, a deadly dance of desires, a thrilling interplay of fear and pleasure. The knife, a constant presence, was a metronome, setting the tempo of our encounter, guiding us through the intricate steps of our twisted waltz. With each kiss, each touch, the knife's presence intensified the thrill, the danger, and the pleasure. It was a dangerous game, a thrilling descent into the unknown, an intoxicating exploration of the darker corners of our desires. The knife continued its menacing glide along her back, a cold caress that sent shivers of anticipation down my spine. The air crackled with unspoken desires, with the promise of forbidden pleasure, with the intoxicating thrill of venturing into the heart of the unknown. My touch became bolder, my senses heightened, my breath ragged, the heat of our shared desire rising to a crescendo. The knife, a constant reminder of the danger, heightened the thrill, the ecstasy, the fear. And then, with a gasp, a tremor, a cry that was both a scream and a sigh of relief, a climax arrived, a storm of passion, a whirlwind of exhilaration and fear. The knife fell from her hand, clattering onto the silk sheets, its cold steel a stark contrast to the warmth of our bodies, entangled in a symphony of pleasure and pain. In the aftermath, the room was filled with the scent of jasmine, of sweat, of that strange metallic tang that seemed to permeate everything. The knife lay on the floor, a symbol of our shared transgression, a chilling reminder of the dangerous path we had walked. She lay beside me, her eyes closed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her beauty, the dangerous allure that had drawn me in, was now bathed in the soft glow of the morning light, a delicate bloom emerging from the shadows. And yet, as I looked at her, a new fear took root, a chilling realization that the danger I had embraced, the thrill of the unknown, had left its mark, a residue of fear and guilt clinging to the intoxicating aftertaste of our encounter. I knew I had crossed a line, ventured into forbidden territory, danced with the devil and emerged scarred. But there was also a part of me, a dark, twisted part, that craved it, that longed for the dangerous thrill, the intoxicating rush of fear and pleasure, the intoxicating dance with the darkness. As I left that room, leaving the silk sheets and the lingering scent of jasmine and danger behind, I knew I had been changed. The memory of her touch, the chill of the knife against her skin, the whisper of forbidden pleasure, would forever haunt me, a chilling reminder of the dark path I had chosen.